Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I am so excited to be filming this video for you guys today. Yes, we are going to be diving into all 30 winners from 1993 to 2023. I'm so excited to get into it, guys, because we're going to be talking about whether I think, these Best Picture winners have stood the test of time, whether I feel like they're still masterpieces, whether I've even heard of them. This is gonna be a fun time. This is gonna be such a fun time, guys, so stay tuned if that sounds interesting to you. But before we dive into all of that good stuff, as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. And also be sure to let me know your thoughts on this tier list series idea on my channel. If you have any ideas for future tier lists, I have a bunch, okay, in a Word document, but if you guys have any suggestions, I would love to hear them. Okay guys, now without further ado, let's dive into this tier list for the Best Picture winners. So before we start to slot these Best Picture winners into their respective categories, I of course have to go through the categories themselves. This is so exciting. Okay, first of all, okay, in the S tier category, the top of the very top, we have This is Timeless Cinema. This is la creme de la creme of cinema. I wanted to call it This Is Cinema, but that's very played out. And also I really wanted to emphasize the timeless part, because that is the true test here when it comes to some of these films. Yes, they may have been seen as the best of the best at the time, but are we still looking back with fondness? Are we still looking back in awe of that film? That's the true test of the top tier category. Okay, but next one down, we have It Did In Fact Give. It did in fact give. Now this is reserved for the films that they gave at the time. Whether or not it stood the test of time is a bit, but for sure it gave. For sure, like when it won Best Picture, it made sense. It absolutely did. So that's the second tier. Next tier is Furrowed Brows in the Room. It's this. It's giving, okay. Like that's what that's giving. So all of the Best Picture winners that fall under this category, that make you look a bit like, okay, I guess, that's the category that's next one down, right? So then the next one further down, we have Raised Eyebrows and Wide Eyes in the Room. This is just like this. This is, who let that happen? Was it you? Was it you, sir? Like, that is pure confusion. Should that have won Best Picture? Absolutely not. Like, that is a system error. That is a syntax error even. Like, that is just pure no. Absolutely not. And then the next category down we have is Girl, I Don't Know Who She Is. I don't know who she is, and that does exactly what it says on the tin. Okay, like I don't know her, I haven't watched her, I probably haven't even heard of her. Like Best Picture winner, okay. If you say so. Okay, so now that I've gone through what each of the tiers mean, it's time to get into the Best Picture winners themselves. Starting us off at 1993, where the Best Picture winner was Schindler's List. I think it's fair to say that this is cinema. I think it's fair to say that Schindler's List is absolutely under the category of This Is Cinema. Like, it is truly one of the most iconic films of all of the 20th century, let alone its own year. But let's go through the actual nominees that year. So starting us off with Schindler's List, which ended up being the winner. But the other nominees in the category were The Fugitive, In the Name of the Father, The Piano, and The Remains of the Day. So I think it's fair to say that Schindler's List ended up being the most iconic out of all of these nominees. I haven't even heard of some of these other ones. I haven't even I actually don't know what's going on there. So this is actually going to be a short one. Schindler's List absolutely goes in the This Is Timeless Cinema category. Okay, so next one up for 1994, we have Forrest Gump. This is interesting. Now do keep in mind, okay, this is my opinion. This is based off of my opinion. Like, if you want an official ranking, you can get it from, like, I don't know, IMDb or somewhere else. But you've come here for my take, for my opinion. Forrest Gump. I have heard of it. I have seen it. I saw it, what, 15 years ago? Like, it's been a while. It's been a very long time. I don't think Forrest Gump is timeless cinema. Me personally, I don't think Forrest Gump is timeless cinema. I'm gonna give Forrest Gump, it did in fact give. I think it did in fact give. But let's take a look at the fellow nominees that year in 1994. So in 1994, Forrest Gump ended up winning, but you also had Four Weddings and a Funeral, Pulp Fiction, Quiz Show, and The Shawshank Redemption. Oh, hang on. Oh, hang on a minute. Forrest Gump absolutely should not have won in that year. What? It should have gone to Shawshank, or it should have gone to Pulp Fiction. Oh, it's definitely not timeless cinema. Are you kidding me? Yeah, no, I think it did in fact give. It did in fact give, and it'll probably be in the lower end of that tier as well when we go through the rest. So yeah, Forrest Gump is in the second tier. Anyway, moving on. So for these films from the 90s, these are going to be pretty quick because honestly, I haven't seen many of these films in a long time. So I don't have very strong opinions on them. But next one up, we have from 1995, Braveheart. And here the fellow nominees were Apollo 13, Babe was nominated for Best Picture. That's wild. Okay. The Postman and Sense and Sensibility. So I think it's Mel Gibson, that's the thing. Ooh, and this is my list. But it is kind of setting aside my feelings on Mel Gibson, which you guys should already ascertain. Is this timeless cinema, or did it in fact give? I have seen Braveheart, but I didn't love it. I'm gonna say it gave. I'm gonna say, because I personally don't have any emotional attachment to Braveheart. Like, me personally, I don't really care that much, but it was a phenomenal viewing experience. So I'm not gonna, take that away from the film. So I'm gonna say it gave way more than Forrest Gump, so we can swap those around. Okay, so next one up, we have 1996. This was the year of my birth. Ooh. And we're starting off with The English Patient, which ended up winning the award. But the other nominees were Fargo, Jerry Maguire, Secrets and Lies, and Shine. This wasn't the strongest year for the Academy, honestly. None of these years have been particularly strong so far, apart from 1994 with Pulp Fiction and Shawshank. That's a very strong year. But for 1996, The English Patient, I'm sorry to say, because it was the year of my birth, never heard of it. Never. Never. Apparently it's one of the most nominated films of all time. I'll take your word for it. And you know what that means? It's going under. Girl, I don't know who she is. Quite literally, don't know her, don't feel anything towards her, which is sad because again, it's from 1996. But what can I do? What can I say? What can I do? I don't know who this girl is. Okay, so next one up is 1997, where the Best Picture winner was Titanic. Oh, I'm so jealous. That is a Best Picture winner. Oh, timeless cinema for sure. Are you joking? Titanic. Oh yeah, timeless cinema. Absolutely. Okay, but let's go through the fellow nominees. So we have Titanic, As Good as It Gets, never heard of it. The Full Monty, have heard of it. Good Will Hunting, have seen it. And LA Confidential, I've never seen it. Titanic is definitely the one that stands out to me. Absolutely. Are you joking? It was a phenomenon of a film. And it was one of the few Best Picture winners that was actually really successful at the box office as well. It's one of the highest grossing films of all time, so it really was a success on all fronts. It's absolutely timeless cinema. It just got re-released this year. Oh, absolutely. It's a classic. So that deserves to be top tier. Is it above Schindler's List? I think it is. In terms of timeless cinema, I think it is. It's tough because Schindler's List covers such a sensitive topic, so it's like, how can you compare? But they're both about, tragedies, but on different scales. But I would say Titanic, to me, is more of a timeless cinematic masterpiece. I mean, it's tough. It's tough. They both deserve to be on the top tier. Moving on to 1998. We're really going through these very quickly because, again, it's the 90s. I'm not particularly attached. Here we have Shakespeare in Love. Oh. Oh, no. Oh no. Remember that annoying sound that people used to use on TikTok? It's like, oh no, oh no, oh no, from a few years back. I would play that here. I would play that here, boy. Let's go through the fellow nominees, shall we? So we have Shakespeare in Love winning in 1998. What kind of Harvey Weinstein nonsense is this? Okay, next up we have Elizabeth. We have Life is Beautiful, never heard of it. Saving Private Ryan. And we also have The Thin Red Line, which I've heard of but I've never seen. The fact that Shakespeare in Love won is some Harvey Weinstein tomfoolery, if I ever did see some. If I ever did see some, that is black magic. That is horrendous. I think truly it should have been Saving Private Ryan, period. Like, absolutely. But even if I didn't like want Saving Private Ryan to win, it would absolutely be Elizabeth. It would, like, my mind would never even go to Shakespeare in Love. I have seen Shakespeare in Love, to be clear. It was like 10 years ago when I was watching a bunch of these Best Picture winners, but I remember watching it and thinking, this won Best Picture? It's like an okay sort of period rom-com, but it's not really a comedy. It's a romantic drama, really, you know, about Gwyneth Paltrow dressing up as a man, and she won an Oscar for it as well. It's fine. But it's like, it's not even the best kind of romantic drama from that era. Like, it's so bizarre. Oh my goodness. And then Judi Dench, didn't she win an Oscar for being Queen Elizabeth for like 2 seconds? It's such a weird Harvey Weinstein messed up situation that really showed the power that he had in the industry during this time. So yeah, this is like the weirdest flex in his Rolodex, honestly. Shakespeare in Love winning. Literal witchcraft. In terms of my actual ranking for this film, I would say raised eyebrows. Absolutely. Raised eyebrows and wide eyes. Like, for sure. Like, for it to be nominated, I would put, you know, furrowed brows. Like, okay. But for it to win, raised. My brows are raised, my eyes are wide. Okay, so next up we have 1999, before the millennium. And here the winner was American Beauty. I've actually never seen American Beauty. So but let's look at these fellow nominees. The Cider House Rules, never heard of it. The Green Mile, have seen it, literally watched it last year, interesting film. The Insider and The Sixth Sense. I would personally give it to The Sixth Sense. Yes, I would. Again, haven't seen American Beauty, to be fair, so put an asterisk next to that. But I would personally give it to The Sixth Sense. I think that film is a true masterpiece. It's tough when it comes to American Beauty. I can't really judge it as a film because I've never watched it, so I have to say I don't know who she is. I do know who she is. I've heard of her, but I've never seen her, so I don't really know her. So we're gonna have to put her in I don't know who she is, I'm afraid. But we're gonna put her above The English Patient, because I literally do not know who she is. Okay, so now we've hit the year 2000. We have officially arrived at the millennium, where the winner for Best Picture was Gladiator. Oh yes. Cinema. Let's not even waste any time. Now, cinema, is it above? I would put it in third. Place. I think it's fine sitting next to Schindler's List. But this, masterpiece. Yeah. Yes. Do you know what I mean? Like the Gladiator. Oh, and they're making a second one, which I'm a bit apprehensive about. I'm like, okay, I don't think it's going to be as good as the first. But either way, I mean, Russell Crowe killed 8. Joaquin Phoenix, absolutely 8. Like that film was special. It was truly phenomenal. And I watched it for the first time like 2 years ago. So it's still fresh on my mind, the experience of watching Gladiator and being like, man, they used to make epic films like this. That's crazy. That's wild. It's so good. Yeah, I'm a really big fan of Gladiator. Absolutely. But let's take a look at the fellow nominees that year. So we have Gladiator, Chocolat, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Erin Brockovich, and Traffic. I would give it to Gladiator. I can't remember Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon much. But it's like one of the most beautiful, stylistically stunning films ever made. So to be fair, it's a very worthy contender. But I would give it to Gladiator, even though it might be recency bias because I've watched it more recently. But what can I say? You know, Gladiator is excellent. Okay, so next up we have 2001, where the Best Picture winner was A Beautiful Mind. So here the nominees were Gosford Park, In the Bedroom, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, I was going to say Fellowship of the King, and Moulin Rouge. First of all, I love Moulin Rouge. I love Moulin Rouge. We've just come off of another Baz Luhrmann year where Elvis was also nominated for Best Picture, but I think his work on Moulin Rouge was top tier. Moulin Rouge and The Great Gatsby, those two were like my favourite Baz Luhrmann films, and Romeo and Juliet, which I also really loved. I probably would have voted for that one, honestly, out of these nominees. When it comes to Lord of the Rings, I'm not really a Lord of the Rings girly. Keep that in mind. That might become relevant in the future. But when it comes to A Beautiful Mind, I did watch A Beautiful Mind. I didn't. It's the one with Paul Bettany, right? Like, I didn't love it. I found it to be a little bit forgettable. I mean, it's another Russell Crowe movie, so he was definitely on a hot streak, you know, in 2000, 2001. It was good. Yeah. It was a very interesting character study. Sure. So in terms of what tier I would put this in, I'm gonna put it in Furrowed Brows. Yeah, that's how I feel. I would give it to Moulin Rouge, or maybe even Lord of the Rings, like if you're a Lord of the Rings fan. But A Beautiful Mind was like, it was a good film, but you know, I don't think it's like a timeless, certainly not a timeless masterpiece for sure. Okay, so next up in 2002, the winner for Best Picture at the 75th Academy Awards was Chicago. Yes. Again, I feel the same way about Chicago as I do Gladiator, where it's like, why don't we get more of this anymore? Like, Chicago is a vibe. Chicago is an excellent, I remember watching it, just sitting back and thinking, this is excellence that I'm witnessing. True excellence. Yep, Chicago is a timeless cinema. Timeless cinema for sure, without question. The musical performances are exceptional. The actual music itself is good. Like, the soundtrack is good. I think they did a really great job of interpreting the famous stage production to a more cinematic medium, really utilizing the cinematic aspects of film, and just like stepping it up. And also you have these incredible performances by Renee Zellweger and Catherine Zeta-Jones. Like, it's just excellent. And Richard Gere, it's just excellent. Now here's the thing, where is it when it comes to cinema? I'm gonna put it above Gladiator but below Schindler's List. I think that's where we're gonna settle on Chicago, but I really am a huge fan of that film and it's wholly deserving of the Best Picture win. Let's see what the fellow nominees were that year. So we had Gangs of New York, The Hours, don't know what that is, Lord of the Rings, Two Towers. Lord of the Rings was like doing bits at the time. Okay, good for you, Lord of the Rings. And The Pianist. Oh no, The Pianist. Roman Polanski. Never mind, Chicago won. Chicago deserved to win. Okay, so next up in 2003, we have Lord of the Rings finally taking home the Best Picture award. And fair enough, let's see what the fellow nominees were. So we have Lost in Translation, Master and Commander, Mystic River, and Seabiscuit. Yeah. It was a pretty easy year, honestly. The only contender would probably be Lost in Translation, especially like in hindsight. But I have seen all of the Lord of the Rings movies. But those of you who may have checked out my video last year discussing franchises that I don't care about, you'll know that Lord of the Rings falls under that category. I just simply do not care about Lord of the Rings. I'm sorry to say, if you're a huge fan, this might upset you, and you know, sorry about that, but I don't care. Like I've watched all of these films. I haven't seen the Hobbit films though. But they were just so long and so convoluted to me. Like I was just lost and I wasn't invested in this world. So sorry. When it comes to the tier list, I'm going to be fair, okay, because I have seen it and I do acknowledge the technical proficiency of Peter Jackson's filmmaking. So I'm going to say it gave. I'm going to say it gave for the time. It did in fact give. I'm going to put it above Forrest Gump, but below Braveheart. How about that? Eh? That's a peace offering. Next up in 2004, the Best Picture winner was $1 Million Baby. And here the fellow nominees were The Aviator, Finding Neverland. Finding Neverland was nominated for Best Picture. Oh no, I'm thinking of the Robin Williams one. Never mind. Ray, as in Ray Charles. Oh, I would have given it to Ray. Oh, with Jamie Foxx and Robert Downey Jr. Oh, I would have given it to Ray. Although I haven't seen most of these other ones, and Sideways, whatever that is. Yeah, I would have given it to Ray. But $1 Million Baby is also an excellent film. I'm gonna say it gave. I'm not really invested in $1 Million Baby, honestly. I watched it once again when I was going through that Best Picture marathon. And yeah, it's not one that really stood out to me. So I think it did in fact give, but am I going to put it in front of Forrest Gump? No, I'm going to leave it behind Forrest Gump. Because I think Forrest Gump, to be fair, is quite iconic, even if I don't have any personal attachment to that film. Okay, next up in 2005 for the 78th Academy Awards, the Best Picture winner was Crash. Talk about a crash and burn. Am I right? Am I right? Raised eyebrows, wide eyes. Who let this happen? Crash? Let's look at the fellow nominees. Brokeback Mountain. I don't even need to say anything else. I don't even need to say anything else, but I'll continue. Capote, never heard of that one. Good Night and Good Luck, never heard of it. Munich. Steven Spielberg lost to Crash. That's embarrassing. Nah, that's ridiculous. It should have gone to Brokeback. Oh, what kind of homophobia is this? It should have gone to Brokeback Mountain. Are you kidding me? Brokeback Mountain lost to Oh, that's an injustice. Oh my word, no way. Anywho, listen, the Academy had the big question of who to give the Best Picture award to literally like, what, 15 years ago, and they gave it to the wrong person. But my big question today is which bottom tier is Crash gonna go in? I'm gonna say Raised Eyebrows though. And I'm going to say even worse. Oh, is it worse than Shakespeare in Love? No. Because Shakespeare in Love won against Saving Private Ryan. That's just like a crime against humanity. So it's not worse than that. But Brokeback, that's homophobia for sure. Anyway, next up in 2006, we have The Departed winning Best Picture against Babel, Letters from Iwo Jima, Little Miss Sunshine and The Queen. I have seen Babel, I can't remember how to pronounce it. I have seen it though, and I have seen The Queen for sure. But The Departed trumps, it absolutely trumps them in my opinion. Now, is this timeless cinema? In my opinion, I wouldn't say it is personally. Me personally, I wouldn't say that The Departed is timeless cinema. It's a very good crime thriller drama situation, but I would put it in, it did in fact give. It did in fact give for sure. And I'm going to put it ahead of Braveheart. I prefer it to Braveheart. I would sooner watch The Departed than Braveheart. So yes, I would put it ahead of Braveheart for sure. So there we have it. We have a new front runner in It Did in Fact Give. So next up in 2007, the winner for the Best Picture award was No Country for Old Men. And the fellow nominees were Atonement, Juno, Michael Clayton, and There Will Be Blood. This is tricky for me. Who would I have given it to? Okay, no, I'll be honest. I would give it to There Will Be Blood over No Country. Does that make me crazy? I think Javier Bardem in No Country was incredible, but Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood? Okay. I probably would have given it to There Will Be Blood, but you know, I think that it's a toss up between the two, really. It was a pretty strong year, apart from this Michael Clayton situation. But in terms of my tier list, No Country, I'm going to say it gave. I'm going to say it gave for sure. I would put it ahead of Million Dollar Baby. Yes, but after Forrest Gump. So it absolutely gave. But I don't think it's like a classique that I personally will consider to be timeless. So next up we have 2008, and this is where I really started to follow the Oscars. Like beforehand, my parents would perhaps, you know, have it on TV in the background and I would be vaguely aware of what's going on. But in 2008, like that's where I really started to understand, you know, about the awards race and all of the awards leading up to the Oscars, and I really started to get interested. So in 2008, on the 81st Academy Awards, the Best Picture winner was Slumdog Millionaire. Absolutely. Abso-freaking-lutely. Are you joking? But the fellow nominees here were The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Side note, love this film. And I think it's so underrated. I actually love this David Fincher film so much. It's one of my favorites of his films. And even though I think that the CG probably doesn't stand the test of time, like it doesn't hold up by today's standards, I still think it was like pioneering technology for sure. Like all of this de-aging that we're seeing in films and TV shows these days have a lot to thank Benjamin Button for. But also, even though the idea was very bizarre, like it's a weird premise and a weird concept, it was also extremely endearing, and Taraji P. Henson in that film was so fantastic. I mean, I really enjoyed The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. It's literally like one of the most underrated Fincher movies, but it's one of my favorites for sure. And then next we have Frost Nixon. Never watched it, but I have, you know, seen clips of it. We have Milk. I remember that being such a big deal at the time. Like, this is what I mean when I say I remember this era of awards season. And then The Reader. Again, I remember this being a big deal as well. But Slumdog takes it home. Not only does Slumdog take it home, but I'm gonna say that Slumdog is timeless cinema. Absolutely. So I'm gonna put it behind Gladiator. I think that's fair. Yeah, absolutely. I like this order a lot. So next we're moving on to 2009, where we have 10 nominees, because this was the year after The Dark Knight, where a lot of people said, you know, if they had expanded the Best Picture category, then The Dark Knight probably would have made it there, because it was one of the best films of 2008, but it wasn't considered just because of the way that the Oscars worked at that point. So they expanded the Best Picture category to include up to 10 films, which, by the way, had been the case like decades before. They used to have 10 nominees and then they shrunk it to 5, and then they expanded it to up to 10 again. And this year in the 82nd Academy Awards, we had The Hurt Locker win. I don't know about that. I mean, it was a very like suspenseful film. To me, The Hurt Locker was, you know, a very good kind of war film from that, you know, 2000s kind of Middle Eastern war era that we used to see a lot in Hollywood. It was a very good one, but that had bursts of like excellence. Like it had bursts of suspense and tension that I think Catherine Bigelow like directed the hell out of. I think that's what The Hurt Locker really represents, with like great performances by Jeremy Renner and the like, and Anthony Mackie was also in there. So yeah, I did like The Hurt Locker, but to me, again, this is my list, I wouldn't say that it should have won against all of these guys. So I'll read out the nominees for you. So we have Avatar, the first Avatar, The Blind Side, District 9, An Education, Inglourious Basterds, Precious, A Serious Man, Up, okay, very impressive for Pixar, and Up in the Air, not to be confused with Pixar's Up. I would give it to, honestly, I would give it to either Avatar although the writing is so weak and it's so derivative, but it was like groundbreaking and all of that. But actually, no, personally, I would give it to Inglourious Basterds. Who am I kidding? Who am I kidding? I would give it to Inglourious Basterds, which I think still remains my favorite Tarantino film. That and Django are my favorites. I personally wouldn't have given it to The Hurt Locker. But anywho, it doesn't matter. The big question for today is, what tier is The Hurt Locker going in? I'm going to put it in the "it did in fact give" at the end. Yeah. It did in fact give after $1 Million Baby. Okay, so now we're breaking into the brand new decade. And here in 2010 at the 83rd Academy Awards, we saw The King's Speech win. Yes. Yes. I know that this is controversial for some. Look at the smile. I know that this is controversial for some. I know some people disagreed. Ooh, The King's Speech is freaking phenomenal. The King's Speech is divine. Oh, I love that film. Oh, but yes, I do. Listen, we'll go through the fellow nominees and we'll go through my thoughts on them because it was a very good year. It was a very, very good year. So we had Black Swan. I know. We have The Fighter. I know. Inception. I know. The Kids Are Alright. 127 Hours. I know. The Social Network. I know. Toy Story 3. I know. True Grit. Yeah. And Winter's Bone. Yeah. So, like I said, very strong year. Very, very strong year. At least half of these would have won Best Picture in any other year. So it was really, really tough. But here's the thing. I still think that The King's Speech deserved to win. And the reason why I love it so much is because you have that holy trinity of Colin Firth, Helena Bonham Carter, and Geoffrey Rush. That these three at the center of the story just absolutely embodied their performances. The connection, the interpersonal relationship between Colin Firth's King George VI and Geoffrey Rush's, speech therapist character. I can't remember what his name was. Apologies. But those two were just so magnetic. It was such a beautiful friendship to behold. And then you have Helena Bonham Carter portraying Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, who was just such an incredible wife to George VI. I just found the exploration of the relationships between these three people to be so expertly carried out. And then at the center of all of this, you have this incredible performance by Colin Firth portraying King George VI, and it makes him such a character that you can empathize with, a character that you can understand and you feel for. He's been thrown into the deep end because his brother, Edward VIII, or who would have been Edward VIII, abdicates from the throne, and so all of a sudden he is the king, and he has a speech impediment, he has all of these insecurities, and he had a whole life that he imagined for himself that was very different and away from the spotlight that he has now been thrown into. It was fantastic. Is what I'm trying to say. But overall, I would say absolutely deserved to win. I think Tom Hooper absolutely nailed the directing, and this was before he was doing things like Cats. Like, can you imagine the same man that directed The King's Speech and Les Mis directed Cats? But in terms of these other nominees, I mean, like I said, it was a very strong year. I could have easily seen Black Swan winning. I could have easily seen the Social Network winning. And I think, to be honest, what happened here is that The King's Speech benefited from the way that people voted. Because when you're voting for Best Picture, you pick your preference. So you say like what your first place is, second place, third place, etc. And I think in the case of The King's Speech, it was perhaps enough people saying that it was their second favorite or third favorite that it actually boosted it to the top, because the voters were probably split between all of these incredible films, and they named the other films as their yeah, first place, that The King's Speech ended up rising because enough people named it as like second place, for instance. There's a particular kind of calculation or formula that they use at the Academy, but I think in this case it benefited from that formula. Rather than emerging as the best film out of the list, even though I am a fan of it, I think it was more the case that enough people voted it as their number 2 or 3. But regardless of what the Academy had to say, it's time for me to decide what tier I'm going to put The King's Speech in. And considering how much I just gushed about it, I think it's fair to say that I consider it to be timeless cinema. Yes, I know it's unpopular, but I really do love The King's Speech. It's phenomenal. I'm gonna put it below Slumdog. I think that's fair. Yeah, I'm not crazy. Okay, so next up we have 2011, and here the winner was the oh. Why does this always happen? I always get so excited one year and then the next year comes along and it's just like, meow. Oh, The Artist. Speaking of a film that probably benefited from the calculations at the Academy, okay, let's see the fellow nominees, shall we? So in 2011, the nominees for Best Picture were The Artist, The Descendants, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, which was a title that always always confused me. The Help, Hugo, Midnight in Paris, Moneyball, The Tree of Life, and War Horse. Now, I personally, my favorite film from this list, hands down, without question, is The Help. Oh, I am the Help apologist, except I'm not apologizing. I love The Help. I truly think it's one of the best films ever made. Yes, I do. Absolutely. Now, here's the thing. I completely acknowledge the issues that the film has, especially when it comes to the white saviorism, the white savior aspect of that story. That is definitely a weak point of the story. But here's the thing as well, something that kind of frustrates me when it comes to film discourse, especially around Black film discourse or discourse surrounding films that represent underrepresented groups, is that sometimes people or critics will like pick one aspect of a film or a TV show or a piece of media that is, you know, less than perfect, a little bit problematic, and they will just blow it up to such a proportion that the whole thing becomes infected with this one issue. There's probably a better way for me to word this, but essentially it frustrates me that the issue of the white savior in The Help has kind of eclipsed how exceptional the film otherwise is. That's a better way for me to word it. And it's a similar phenomenon that we see with films like Princess and the Frog, for instance, or Green Book, which I'll talk about in a second, or Soul, you know, films that deal with, you know, Black people and Black characters that may have misstepped in certain ways, like in Princess and the Frog with Tiana being a frog for too long. Tiana being a frog in her own film, that is an issue. But does that take away from the other incredible aspects of that film? No, not in my opinion. So anyway, that's what frustrates me about the discourse surrounding The Help, because I still think it's a phenomenal film with untouchable performances, especially of course by Octavia Spencer and Viola Davis. Please, you can't come close to those. So yeah, if it was made today, I would like to think that there would be several improvements, you know, to the film, but alas, it was made in like 2010, so we get what we're given. But it was still a beautiful film that is worth watching. In terms of these other movies, I mean, Midnight in Paris, not even for the fact that it's Woody Allen, right? Let's set that to the side. I actually watched Midnight in Paris as part of my marathon for Best Picture stuff. I didn't get it. I found it to be a bit boring. Me personally. I've seen several of these. The Artist, though, couldn't have one. I would have given it to The Help any day of the week, quite frankly, any freaking day of the week. but the artist should have never been in contention. So I would put the artist in, I don't know who she is. I absolutely don't know who she is. And I don't care to know who she is. She's at the end of that category. Okay, so next up in 2012, we have the 85th Academy Awards, and the Best Picture winner that year was Argo. And the fellow nominees were Amour, Beasts of the Southern Wild, Django Unchained, Life of Pi, Lincoln, Les Mis, Silver Linings Playbook, and Zero Dark 30. I can't really remember Argo. I can't really remember Argo. I have seen it, but I can't really remember. It didn't really have like a lasting impression on me. There's those kinds of films that just like, those kind of investigative, you know, films about, was it about war? Is that something to do with a mission, right? Like a big mission for war? Out of this list, I would have chosen Django, absolutely. I'll tell you who I wouldn't have chosen though, for free. Silver Linings Playbook. I never understood the hype around that film, because I remember watching that one and I remember just being so confuzzled, so bemused, okay, like so confused about why this was so popular and considered so highly. I remember Bradley Cooper's character just annoying the hell out of me. I didn't like Jennifer Lawrence's character either. Like the whole film to me was just baffling. I didn't get it. Maybe I should rewatch it. But no, I'd rather not. I'd really rather not. And then, of course, you have Les Mis here. Speaking of Tom Hooper, he makes another appearance in the Best Picture category. And I would have been cool with Les Mis winning, you know. But again, I can't remember Argo, so I have no affection towards it. So, in light of that, let's go to the tier. So, for the tier, I would put it in Furrowed Brows. I'm going to put it in Furrowed Brows. For me personally, like I didn't see it as anything too remarkable. I think the story, you know, the actual real life story is incredible, but the film itself is like, yeah, okay, fine. Okay, so next up in 2013, we saw 12 Years a Slave take home the award for Best Picture. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. You know, setting aside the white guilt of it all, that film is like truly like everyone, well, okay, most people have to see that film at least once, but you never have to watch it again afterwards. Like that film is, yeah, it's something that you have to experience at least once. It was just truly, it was a remarkable story, and it was gut-wrenching, and it was horrifying, and it was angering. I mean, I think at this point in Hollywood history, thankfully, we've kind of moved away from the sole black representation that we get in film being based in suffering and slavery or maids or butlers and stuff like that. We've kind of moved away from that, and this is something that I talk about often, the diversification of representation of black people. That's something that we started to see emerge in the last decade, and it's a really exciting time at the moment. But I do still think that stories like 12 Years a Slave definitely needed to be told. They're so important. If you stop telling them, people will forget, and they are happy to forget, and they are happy to miseducate or undereducate or bury, you know, under the sand, because they don't want to face the realities of what really happened in America for 400 plus years to black people. So it's important to have these, is what I'm saying. It's important to have them. I just don't think that they should be all that we get in terms of black representation. But in terms of the fellow nominees in this category this year, we have American Hustle. I remember that film. I didn't love it either, but I remember it being very, very big. Captain Phillips. I can't believe Captain Phillips came out 10 years ago. Captain Phillips is a film that feels so timeless to me that I think it either came out 20 years ago or yesterday. What an odd film. Captain Phillips is like, it ended up being very, very iconic. Dallas Buyers Club, never watched it. Gravity, I found Gravity a little bit boring, not gonna lie. I found her a bit boring as well. Though keep in mind, when it comes to these films, a lot of them I watched at the time. This was when I was really starting to get into movies and film, and I was really following award season. So I was actually trying to catch, you know, all of these nominees. And so my opinions on a lot of these films are based off of what Jean thought 10 years ago. I think, you know, perhaps if I went back and rewatched them, I would, you know, think differently, but I can't be rewatching every single film that I watched when I was a teenager. Are you kidding me? So, so for now, my opinions are just rooted in the past, and I'm going to say American Hustle was good, but I didn't love it. Captain Phillips was iconic. Dallas Buyers Club, I didn't watch. Gravity was kind of boring to me. Her was kind of boring to me. Nebraska, never heard of it. And Philomena, I remember looking like a very boring kind of film for older people. Not to be ageist, but that's what I thought when I was a teenager. And then The Wolf of Wall Street, which I did watch and I thought was too long. It was very, you know, in excess. Everything was in excess, and it is a really incredible film, but I did think it was way too long. So yeah, I would pick 12 Years a Slave. Now, in terms of its positioning in the Timeless Cinema tier, I would put it above Chicago and below Schindler's List. Honestly, they're kind of on par, and they're both very traumatic. But yeah, I would put 12 Years a Slave at number 3 on the top tier. So next up we have 2014, and I remember 2014 being an incredible year for film. A phenomenal year for film, and not just for the awards nominees, like even for the MCU, for instance. 2014 was a year that we got Captain America: The Winter Soldier and Guardians 1. So like it was a very good year for film. But in terms of the Oscars, we saw Birdman, or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance, take home the award for Best Picture. I wholeheartedly disagree with this. I wholeheartedly disagree with this. This makes no sense to me. Let's take a look at these nominees, shall we? So we have American Sniper. Never watched it, don't care. Boyhood, that whole life experiment, whatever. And then we have the Grand Budapest Hotel. Now, funny thing about the Grand Budapest Hotel, I remember watching it at the time and not really liking it. I didn't quite get it, you know, and I was like, what is this? It's a bit quirky, it's a bit weird. But I since watched it again. In fact, it was actually last year that I watched it again. And after having seen a lot more Wes Anderson films and understanding his style and his vision and artistic quality, I really, really came to love the Grand Budapest Hotel. I know, I'm late, but it's a very good film. It's a very good film. It speaks to what I'm saying, of course, which is sometimes if you watch something twice, you get a new perspective on it. In the case of the Grand Budapest, you know, it definitely made me appreciate the film much more. And so I would have much rather see it win instead of Birdman. But anywho, we continue. We have The Imitation Game. This is a film that I loved the first time I saw it. Whilst I was watching that, I was like, this is excellence. This is brilliant. The Imitation Game. Oh, man. Oh, what? Oh, cinema. Anyway, and Benedict Cumberbatch in that film. Oh, my goodness. Anywho, well, I don't know if he should have taken home the award, because then Theory of Everything. Wow. Selma. And then Whiplash. Oh my god. You're telling me Birdman won against The Imitation Game, Grand Budapest Hotel, Whiplash, Theory of Everything, and Selma? And Boyhood, which was a whole thought experiment? That is crazy to me. That is wild. Now, on the one hand, I do understand, because Birdman is very inside baseball. You know, the Academy loves films about itself. And here we have Michael Keaton portraying an older actor who's trying to, you know, get serious about his acting and about his skills as a thespian by going to theatre after years of, you know, being in Hollywood and being in franchise movies. And that's definitely something that Michael Keaton can't relate to, right? But yeah, ironically, he's kind of gone full circle again and now he's Batman again. Anywho, but yeah, I do see the appeal for the Academy to vote for this film. And it was also very interesting because it had that like one take kind of effect. So it felt very, it was very engaging and enthralling in that way. I just did not love Birdman. I don't understand how it won against The Imitation Game. Oh my god. The Imitation Game is one of the very few perfect films ever made. Man, Whiplash? You have Damien Chazelle's Whiplash, okay? Whiplash is in the category of films that made me 1000% invested in something that I otherwise would not care about. Like, I do not care about drumming. I don't care really about orchestras. Like, that's not really my thing. But for the, 2 hours or so that Whiplash was on, I was there. I was living that world. So the fact that Whiplash didn't win is a bit confusing to me personally. But okay, in terms of my ranking of Birdman, I'm not going to say it's raised brows because I'm not like 100% surprised. But I would say forward brows in the room. Forward brows for sure. Okay, so next up we have 2015. And here the Best Picture winner was Spotlight. Interesting. Let's take a look at the nominees. Here we have The Big Short, Bridge of Spies, Brooklyn, Mad Max Fury Road, The Martian, The Revenant, and Room. And Spotlight won. I get it. Yeah, I get it. I can see it. I personally would have picked Mad Max, obviously, because brain cells. Or even The Big Short. So like The Big Short is such a clever film. It was so unconventional, the way that it tried to, make the audience grasp these really difficult and complex topics surrounding finance and all of that. The big Wall Street crash. It did it in such a fun, innovative way. And Adam McKay really put his stamp, in this kind of little subgenre that he created of, films that are exposés on important topics, but do it in a tongue-in-cheek manner. That little space that he occupies. And so yeah, and I still think that The Big Short was the best example of this little subgenre. So I would have given it to The Big Short, or like I said, Mad Max, or even The Martian, or even Room. Like, why not give it to Room? Like, why are we giving it to Spot? Although, to be fair, listen, Spotlight is a pretty conventional kind of expose movie that has excellent performances and is about an extremely important topic. So I think that combined does make Spotlight a contender, but overall as a package it's not the strongest contender to me in this list. So where am I going to put Spotlight? I'm going to put it in furrowed brows. I'm going to put it in furrowed brows. I did enjoy Spotlight, but I didn't enjoy it. But I was intrigued by the story, and it got me to research the story. Oh my god, it opened my eyes to the issues surrounding the Catholic Church. Oh my god. I remember this film coming out. You know what? Yeah, I'm going to put it at the top of furrowed brow. Actually, you know what? I'm going to put it in. It did in fact give, because fudge that Catholic Church. Yeah, it did in fact give. At the end of it did give. Okay, so next up, 2016, we have Moonlight. Yeah. 2016 was a wild Oscar year. Okay, it was a wild Oscar year, but overall, in general, I would say it was a pretty good year for films. I mean, we have Arrival, Fences, Hacksaw Ridge, another Mel Gibson film that I actually watched, and it was actually fantastic. I'm not gonna lie, this goddamn man, I hate him, but that film was good. Andrew Garfield in that movie was excellent. Anywho, Hell or High Water, which I liked, didn't love. Hidden Figures, one of my favorite films of all time, period. I love Hidden Figures, and Taraji P. Henson should have won. Anywho, and then we have La La Land. First half excellent, second half lost me. Lion, which was actually very good. Very, very good. But it was like a traditional sort of Oscar fair movie. It wasn't really groundbreaking. And then Manchester by the Sea. Oh my god. Okay, so there's a lot of problematic people on this list. But Casey Affleck? Listen, we don't talk about Bruno, okay? We don't talk about Casey. But him in Manchester by the Sea, though? What we're not going to do is lie. What we're not going to do is lie and say that he wasn't excellent in that film. It should have gone to Denzel, don't get me wrong. But if you've seen Manchester by the Sea, and if you've seen that moment with the twist, where you find out what happened with Casey Affleck's character, you know that that man did the actoring, okay? So again, it should have gone to Denzel, but he was a contender. Anyway, listen. None of this matters, okay? None of this matters because Moonlight ended up taking it home. There was a bit of a kerfuffle. There was a bit of a confusion, but Moonlight rightfully ended up taking it home. And I remember I was watching this live. I remember I was in uni, I was watching this live at 5 a.m. when the kerfuffle happened. I was disappointed when La La Land won. I was like, oh, whatever. And I love the songs in La La Land, and like I said, the first half really gripped me, and then it kind of lost me a bit. But then when it was revealed that it was Moonlight, I'm just elation, just such happiness, such joy. One of my favorite films to come out in this entire decade, easily. And speaking of the diversification of representation, I mean, Moonlight is just a different flavor. It's just a different vibe that Barry Jenkins introduced into the history of Hollywood representation for Black people. So, cinema, yes it is. Cinema, where am I going to put it in cinema? I'm going to put it in second after Titanic. Oh, it's my list. It's my list. It's my list. I think Moonlight is genuinely a perfect film. Yeah, it's second. Yeah. And also it is very memorable because of the whole kerfuffle thing. So like, but yeah, it is timeless. Absolutely. Yeah, it should be in the archives for sure. For sure. Okay, guys, so we are on 2017. We only have 6 more years left. And here the award went to The Shape of Water. Again, remember what I told you? Every time I get excited, every time there's a good year, my energy just goes whoop for the next year. The Shape of Water, I do not like this film. I'm afraid. And it's not just because it's the fish, sex movie. I understand the message. I understand the sentiment. I appreciate how out of the box it is and how unconventional. You start to see that a little bit more with the films from the last decade, where they're a lot more experimental and different. I mean, we'll talk about the most recent winner. So I appreciate that about The Shape of Water, and I feel like it's just another entry into that trend that we're starting to see for Best Picture winners. But having said all of that, I don't like the film. At the end of the day, I don't like the film. What can I do? The other nominees are Call Me By Your Name, a film that I also did not love, and I didn't understand the hype around it, other than the fact that it was Timothée Chalamet and the cannibal, the alleged cannibal, and the peach. But the film itself, I used to watch a lot of like French films on TV and Italian films even, and to me, Call Me By Your Name wasn't such a huge departure from them. So I didn't understand why people were like lapping it up so much. But again, I think it is the Timothée Chalamet of it all. And then we have Darkest Hour. That was, very good. Gary Oldman was fantastic. The film itself was okay. And then we have Dunkirk, which I think is a film that tackled this topic better as a film overall. And it was absolutely phenomenal. And again, much like with Benjamin Button and David Fincher, people tend to overlook Dunkirk as part of Nolan's filmography, but I love it. I loved Dunkirk. Although, as I said before in my Nolan movie, where I talked about my favourite of his films, Nolan has this thing where he's very robotic in his filmmaking. He's an extremely proficient filmmaker. He's excellent with concepts and these premises, these elevator pitches that are just magnetic. But when it comes to this interpersonal relationships, he really does kind of flounder, and which makes him feel like a robotic filmmaker, a very proficient but emotionless robotic filmmaker. And I think that was the issue with Dunkirk, is that it lacked the humanity of All Quiet on the Western Front, or of a Saving Private Ryan, or even of a Hacksaw Ridge, which, like I said, don't like Mel Gibson, but he knows what he's doing when it comes to this, when it comes to matters of the heart. And that's something that Christopher Nolan hasn't quite tapped into yet, across his filmography overall. I think the best example that we got was Interstellar, but 1 out of like 10 isn't great, so that's not a really great batting average. So he needs to work on that. Hopefully he fixed it for Oppenheimer. If he wants to take home the Oscar, I think that's what he needs to tackle, is that heart element of the story, and building characters that we can actually be invested in and have our hearts bleed for. Anyway, the next nominee here is Get Out, and like that's the end of that. That's the end of that. The fact that Shape of Water won against Get Out, to me, is a sign of racism. I don't know about you guys. But I think the Academy was like, oh, Moonlight already won last year. We don't need to give it to the blacks anymore. And the fact of the matter is, you should have. The fact of the matter is that you should have given it to the blacks. Get Out being nominated here and not getting the award is blasphemous. But anyway, Jordan Peele not getting Best Director is blasphemous. Anywho, and next up we have Lady Bird, which was a very good film. I wouldn't say I would pick it over Get Out though. Phantom Thread, another very good film. Love the costuming, love the costume design, but still did not have an emotional attachment to the story, so I would not give it to it over Get Out. The Post was fine. Three Billboards was okay. I think it coasted off of the subject matter rather than the film making itself, although Sam Rockwell, phenomenal in that film, but I would have given it to Get Out without question. And so as a result of my anger over this, Shape of Water is going in raised brows. My brows are raised, okay, because that's ridiculous to me. Get Out was right there. That's ridiculous to me. Okay, so next up in 2018, the winner was Green Book. So they decided to give it to the blacks that year. And honestly, they had very little choice because there was quite a few black films here. Listen, like I said when it came to The Help, I think Green Book is another kind of casualty of this mentality of, you know, if there's an issue with a film, then we should write it off completely. Much like I haven't written off Hacksaw Ridge, even though Mel Gibson of it all, I have not written off Green Book just because it does have a white savior problem. I acknowledge the white savior problem, but I still think it was a phenomenal film with an excellent performance by Mahershala Ali, giving him his second Academy Award in like 3 years, which was superb. And I think that the biggest issue with Green Book is that it refused to be about Mahershala Ali's character and instead decided to make Viggo Mortensen's character the main character of the story. Like, if it had just allowed it to be about Mahershala Ali, we wouldn't be in this mess. So yeah, they tried to switch around the Driving Miss Daisy story and, you know, try to update it in that way, but they still fell short. I acknowledge that, but I still think it's a fantastic film aside from those issues. It discusses matters of, you know, queer identity in the black community as well, because Mahershala Ali's character was queer, and that's something that people just overlook because they're like, oh, the white savior thing, like, it pisses me off. Anywho, but this year was very interesting. 2018 was doing bits, okay? Here we have Black Panther. Black Panther, if it wasn't for the stigma attached to Marvel movies, okay, and also, to be fair, if it wasn't for the rough CG in the final action sequence of the film, I easily could have seen it go to Black Panther and it would have just made me the happiest person in the world. The happiest person in the world. But alas, it didn't. I also would have been very happy with Black Klansman, because that was also superb, okay? And John David Washington has literally never been better. Like, that outing of his in Black Klansman was truly phenomenal. And I think he's still trying to catch up to the greatness of that performance. But not to diss him or anything, but he was really great in that film. Bohemian Rhapsody being Best Picture nominated, that's nonsense. Although Rami Malek absolutely deserved to win for his portrayal of Freddie Mercury, the film overall was kind of like bog standard. And in fact, I do agree with a lot of people that the following year should have seen Rocket Man be nominated instead of Bohemian. Like, I would have happily sacrificed Bohemian for a nomination for Rocket Man. The Favourite is superb, and I was really happy that Olivia Colman won. Roma was very good. I think it was a bit overhyped because of the novelty of it being black and white and Netflix and foreign language and all of that. A Star is Born. Ooh, here's a confession. Here's an interesting fact. I've never watched A Star is Born. I never watched it. At the time, I'd heard so much about Lady Gaga, and her campaign was just so overbearing and annoying to me. Even though I'm a fan of hers, but that campaign, you have to admit, was a bit cringe and desperate. So in the end, I just never watched the film. In the end, I was over it. I never watched the film. And Vice, oh, Christian Bale, man. Christian Bale is such an icon. So yeah, Vice definitely deserved to be here, but I wouldn't have given it to it. So I'm happy that Green Book won. Short of Black Panther or Black Klansman, I'm okay with this result. In terms of where I would put Green Book, I would say it did in fact give. It absolutely did in fact give. And where I would personally put it, because I am a fan of the film, I would put it above Lord of the Rings, because I don't care about Lord of the Rings. It's my list. I don't care about Lord of the Rings, so I'm putting it at number 3, and it did in fact give. Okay, so next 2019 comes along with a bang, and the winner here is Parasite. Absolutely. Abso-freaking-lutely. I can't remember a time when there was such a clear winner. Actually, no. To be fair, it mirrored 2016 because there were 2 clear frontrunners here with Parasite and 1917. Another one of my favorite. Speaking of emotional, you know, war movies, something that Christopher Nolan couldn't tap into with Dunkirk. 1917 with George Mackay's performance that went so underrated. Sam Mendes did, okay? Sam Mendes did what Christopher Nolan failed to do, and he's been taking pages out of the Nolan book the entire time, so it's hilarious. But anyway, I think 1917 was truly fantastic, phenomenal, and in that film the one take illusion never got old. So I'm looking at you, Birdman. 1917 would have been a front runner any other year, but Parasite was just different in terms of the flavor, in terms of the content, in terms of the intellect. Parasite was just on a different level. It wasn't just about the technical proficiency of filmmaking, although it was also excellent on that front, and the cinematography was superb, but the writing of that film, the characterizations of these characters, the performances. Parasite was just, again, it speaks to the movement that we see, the shift in the films winning Best Picture that are less conventional. They're different to the types of films that we would have seen in the 90s. Here we're getting more experimental, we're getting a little bit more cerebral. It's phenomenal. Parasite is a boon to this list. Like, it's a treasure. Like, if you have a list of Best Picture winners that you want to watch and you have a random number generator and you see Parasite on your list, you're gonna hope that it lands on Parasite. Like, that's the level of excellence we're dealing with it. So with all of that being said, unsurprisingly, I'm gonna put Parasite in This Is Timeless Cinema, because it is. Now, where is the key question? I'm gonna put Parasite above Schindler's List and below Moonlight. So it's at number 3 now. I have to say, I'm surprised in general that there are so many entries in that tier, in the Timeless Cinema tier. I feel like, you know, there have been some really impressive choices for Best Picture over the years. So look at Hollywood actually making the right call, I guess. And then we enter the 2020s. Oh, where it all went wrong. We were on a roll and then it just went. In 2020, we saw Nomadland win. I really did not like Nomadland. I really did not like Nomadland. I thought it was a very dull film. Again, I think it coasted from the subject matter, exploring the lives of, you know, these people that live in trailer parks, you know, the kinds of people that you don't usually see represented in media. I think that was a really important subject matter to tap into. And of course, you had Chloe Zhao's like incredible cinematography and directing that was also a focal point in the film. But the fact that it actually made it to win the Academy Award for Best Picture was like preposterous to me. To me personally, I think the nomination was already enough of an honor, and I think the fact that Chloe Zhao won Best Director was the honor to be given to Nomadland. But the Best Actress and Best Picture of it all made no goddamn sense to me personally. And I mean, let's go through the nominees here for the year. But it was The Father, Judas and the Black Messiah. I think you know who I would have given it to. Mank, boo. Minari, Promising Young Woman. Oh my goodness. Sound of Metal. What? Trial of the Chicago 7. Yeah. So yeah, I would have given it to Judas and the Black Messiah, or Promising, or Sound. I absolutely would not have given it to Nomadland or The Father or to anyone other than Anyone other than Nomadland. But anyway, I think it's safe to say that my eyebrows are up to my forehead, because that is ridiculous. Eyebrows raised, wide eyes for sure in the room. And yeah, I'm gonna put it in the final position as well, like it's last, even after Shape of Water. Okay, so next up in 2021, we saw Coda take home the award for Best Picture. And the fellow nominees this year were Belfast, Don't Look Up, Drive My Car, Dune, King Richard, Licorice Pizza, Nightmare Alley, Power of the Dog, and West Side Story. Again, this wasn't the strongest year, I think, because of the pandemic, but also it just wasn't the strongest year. A lot of these films, like, I wasn't the biggest fan of. I didn't really love Nightmare Alley or Licorice Pizza. I really didn't like Licorice Pizza. Don't Look Up, I thought was okay. It was pretty good in the first half, and in the second half it kind of lost me. I haven't seen Belfast, haven't seen Drive My Car. Dune, I won't even get into Dune. If you see my review of Dune, you know how I feel about that one. Let's just move on. I would have given it to King Richard, and it's not just because it's a black film, although I know I keep choosing the black films, but King Richard is fantastic. I would give it to King Richard, if not Coda. But I also really loved Coda. I really did. I was an advocate for that film the whole time. Now, in terms of what tier I would put it in, I think it did in fact give. I don't think it was quite a cinematic classic masterpiece situation, but it definitely gave. Like, Coda absolutely gave. It was a very heartwarming, touching film about the deaf community, about a deaf family. So it was revolutionary in that way. Unfortunately, it took so long to get a story like that, but here we are. Although it was a remake, to be fair. But yeah, I'm going to say it did in fact give, and I'm going to put it above Forrest Gump, but below Lord of the Rings. I think that makes sense, right? Yeah, I think that... Actually, no. I'm going to put it below Forrest Gump. I think I'm kind of trashing on Forrest Gump a bit too much. I'm going to put it below Forrest Gump and above No Country for Old Men. Which leads us to the most recent entry in the Best Picture winner legacy. And that is Everything Everywhere All at Once. Guys! But first off, let's take a look at the fellow nominees, like we've done for everyone else. And here we have All Quiet on the Western Front, the German remake from last year, Avatar, The Way of Water, Banshees of Inisherin, Elvis, The Fabelmans, Tar, Top Gun Maverick, Triangle of Sadness, and Women Talking. Again, not the strongest year in my opinion. There are a few films that should have been here that weren't. The Woman King. The competition here wasn't the fiercest. But there were some pretty good contenders like Top Gun Maverick and Avatar, in theory, could have been a contender. I think what lets down Top Gun and Avatar is the writing. Like, the complexity of the stories just isn't there. So I think it's safe to say that Everything Everywhere All at Once deserved. Like, it absolutely deserved. But now the big question is, which category would I put Everything Everywhere All at Once? And I think it's safe to say I would put it in timeless cinema. Honestly, there's no other film like it. May I remind you that there were 2 multiverse movies last year and only one of them rose to the top, and it wasn't even the one with the biggest budget? Like, it was hard to do what they did, okay? It was a phenomenal film, and like I said, it represents a shift in the kinds of stories that the Academy is willing to award for the last decade. And it's really exciting, it's a movement away from the conventional types of Oscar bait films that we used to see in the 90s to the early 2000s. We're starting to get these more conceptually interesting and out of the box movies actually be rewarded for their contributions to cinema. So yes, I would put it in timeless cinema, even though of course there is a recency bias because it literally came out last year. And in terms of its position, I would put it I would put it above The King's Speech but below Slumdog. I think that's... yeah. So guys, that's it from me. Now that I told you what my tier list for the Best Picture Oscar winners from the last 30 years, it's time for you guys to let me know what you think of my tier list, where you would put all of these films in your tier lists, and you know, any other thoughts that you have on this down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.